We didn't have that on recording.
Thanks for coming. Thanks to all of you for coming as well. This is the ultimate event for our symposium on sport. I want to introduce the moderator, facilitator, and then she'll introduce our guests. Most of you do know Dr. Laura Ferguson, Grinnell alumna, native of Grinnell, Iowa. Studied art, that's the most interesting thing, an art major at Grinnell College, and then she went to medical school. We're, as a community at college, so fortunate to have you here, and you served on the board of trustees. You're an important part of, you and your family are an important part of the community, and I think it's safe to say that the college and the community are much better places because of you. So with that, I'll turn the mic over to you.
Thanks, Barb. It's nice to see everybody here tonight. As you might imagine, head injury is something that I think a little bit about in my everyday life, but clearly not to as great a degree as Mike and Kim, so I'm so glad that they could join us to share their experiences. Mike was a professional athlete, and after that, a broadcast journalist. A graduate of Northwestern University, he was a celebrated college football player. When he graduated, he went on to play in the NFL beginning in the early 1970s. When Mike retired from football in 1976, at that point with the Chicago Bears organization, he moved into broadcast journalism. Mike's career in front of the camera as a journalist spanned a number of decades, and he held high-profile responsibilities. Among these was doing the play-by-play as well as color commentary, sideline reporting, and hosting prominent sports shows and sports entertainment shows. All along, Mike has continued his personal fitness and athletic pursuits, including competing in Ironman triathlons. Very impressive. Since Mike retired from broadcasting, he and his wife Kim have poured their energy into the Mike Adamle project, Rise Above. Kim is an educator, a graduate of University of Kansas and National Louis University. She holds advanced degrees in school psychology and doctorate studies in education, human learning, and development. Kim has worked in education consulting and has been a college professor. She brings her training and education now to work with her husband in a project that we'll hear about today. Thank you so much for joining us here in Grinnell. We're so lucky to have you here.
But they've got it wrong, right? We're delighted to be here in front of you.
It's a privilege to be here. Your lives have been affected by traumatic brain injury and its sequela. Now you are working to address the problem. Can you talk about what brought you to this point?
You want to start?
Sure, I'll start. What brought us to this point? You mentioned, Mike has, he played football. His whole life he was a little guy, tough little guy, a star at Northwestern, played in the pros. And then went on to broadcasting. And in 1999, started having seizures, was diagnosed with epilepsy. And in the mid-2000s, things started to unravel. He was having difficulty with remembering his lines and with words. His performance was a little bit erratic. Which was unlike him because his agent called him the one-take guy. And multiple things happened where our lives fell apart. At this time, in the mid-2000s, it's when came to light that professional athletes were committing suicide, the football players. And nobody knew what was going on yet. Mike and I actually, we lost everything during this time, including our marriage. And we were apart for 5 years, although we remained close as parents with our two daughters who were still at home at the time. We had 4 children overall. Anyhow, in 2014, we got back together. And Mike was having more difficulty with things, and so I took over, running the household and all the detail work, paperwork, insurance work, all of that stuff, so that Mike could just focus on his job and on taking care of himself. His brain, however, continued to deteriorate. He had 2 major seizures in March of 2016 that led to his retirement. During this time, he had another 3-day stay in the hospital for complete neurological, and his neurologist at that time told him that he had most probably CTE. He had all the symptoms consistent with what we know about CTE. And so we spent the next year, Laura mentioned, my background as an educational psychologist, and so I'm trained in assessment and intervention, and I did my thing and researched, well, what can we do? We know CTE, we can't stop the damage, so what can we do? I thought, okay, we can promote neurogenesis, new brain growth, to mitigate the loss. Researched everything we could do. The doctor could only tell us, do B6, lots of omega-3s, and keep learning, keep working as long as you can. That was it. So we applied ourselves, dedicated that was our mission. And then a year later, NBC came and told Mike's story. And we were flooded with messages and calls and emails from hundreds and hundreds of people all over the country who said, I'm experiencing the same thing, I don't know what to do. Or my husband, my son, all these people who were experiencing the same symptoms and were lost and didn't know what to do. They'd go to the doctors. Doctors don't know yet. So that's when Mike said, well, if I have to be, I'm going to speak for you here, honey. If I have to be the one to have this, I'm going to be the one to learn to live with it. And he wanted to reach out to then use what resources we have, we feel blessed, to help those who are suffering. Because right now, we don't know what to do. And just knowing that you're not alone and spreading awareness, and our goal is to create a network of support for those who are suffering. And so coming here and being able to talk to you, to educate people about what CTE is, where we are in our understanding, how we can prevent it, and to offer support to those who are currently suffering until we find a cure.
Kim, could you give us a little background about that acronym, CTE? I'm sure most folks know it, but maybe not everybody.
CTE, you say it better than me.
Yeah.
Chronic traumatic
Encephalopathy.
Yeah. And so what it is, basically, is the brain is just like the consistency of Jell-O inside your hard skull. And it wiggles around like this. And when you have a blow to the head, the brain is sloshing against the hard skull. And so you've all seen football, the hits, the hard hits that are celebrated. Every time that happens, wham, the brain is crashing against the head. In soccer, heading, boom. Anything that is a collision, that brain is hitting the skull. Well, what happens is the nerve cells are joined with an axon, the little piece, and its structure is supported by these protein-like substances. When with a blow, these axons break, and the tau proteins inside now kill the cell. When they break, it kills the cell dies. Tau proteins are now in the brain. They're sticky. The proteins are sticky. So now they tangle and they accumulate like a snowball. And every new cell that it touches, it kills. So you've got this accumulation, this little tangle of tau getting bigger, attracting other ones. Every cell it touches is killing other ones. And you've got these multiple tau tangles in the brain. And so that's the CTE damage, that it continues. That's why that progression takes a while to happen. But that's why the players, the NFL players, are the prime example right now. But we're seeing this across the board in any number of arenas, from athletics at every level to the military, vets, to domestic abuse victims. But that's why initially you don't see the effects, because it takes the tau proteins, it accumulates and snowballs to where you want to tell you a little bit about the symptomology, the etiology of that? CTE starts with more of the affective component. Mood swings, depression, paranoia, explosive rage, impulsivity. Your executive functioning is impaired at this point, so they're very impulsive. Poor decision making. So you see this manifested in the NFL players in terms of bad business decisions. Marriages break up because the target of their aggression is the wife. The front lines, they're starting to experience these erratic behaviors. The wife is right there, and the target then of aggression. And that's why the divorce rate in the NFL is like 75%. In the general public, it's like 51%. And then as that progresses, and so you see typical patterns of job performance, losing jobs, losing businesses, financial distress, bankruptcy, divorce. Then the memory starts to kick in. The memory issues, when the brain damage becomes extensive enough, that's when the impairment becomes more noticeable in terms of cognition, and then to the point of dementia. And then ultimately what happens with CTE is it's brain failure, organ failure, the brain dies. And that's the progression.
So all of this is new, relatively new information to the medical community, because the first case report was published in 2005. So very recently, again, for the medical community. 12 years is not long to learn the things that we need to know about CTE, especially given that generally our diagnoses are made at autopsy. You need a brain biopsy. You usually only do that once the patient's dead, unfortunately. So can you talk a little bit about how the NFL reacted to those early studies in 2005 and the ones that have come forward, how they responded?
Well, do you want me to take this, Mikey, or do you want to talk about the NFL a little bit?
I want to talk about the NFL. First of all, their concern for the players, sometimes you wonder about how much they really do care about the people who started the game and haven't been rewarded for all the things that they have done. But I think when the movie Concussion came out and you heard the story of the doctor, Ben Malu, who did the autopsy on Mike Webster, the center for the Pittsburgh Steelers, it really hit home to so many people, especially ex-players, who have been in that moment where you feel like you're backed into a corner and there's nothing else you can do. And in Mike Webster's case, they found him in a car. I don't know if he swallowed a case of motor oil, but he knew what he was doing. A friend of mine named Dave Durson, who was an all-star safety for the Chicago Bears and a great guy, he committed suicide too. So it caught the attention of the league, but only to a certain point, and eventually they just didn't want to hear it. I think part of the problem is that they just kind of want it to go away, and it's really not their fault when you think about it. I mean, they should be allowed to. I don't think that they put enough credence into this, and I think they didn't want to do anything that would spoil the reputation of the game. That's really important to them first. So they've been kind of sweeping it under the dust, like this stuff doesn't exist in people, but more and more guys are finding out that their buddies or their friends or even themselves say, this is a pretty tragic thing to do. And you think about it, all of our lives, as football players, as athletes, we're taught to, for me it was, my dad was an all-pro linebacker for the Cleveland Browns back in the 50s, and everybody, he was Dr. Avonlea when he got his degree, and I was his son, so I felt like I had to go out there every single day and outperform. My dad said, there's a saying, and it says the big guy has to prove he can't play, the little guy has to prove he can. Boy, that stuck in the back of my mind everything I did. You go, Adam, run me a mile right now. I said, you want 2? I can do that. There's always one up in these guys. So that's sort of how I got to that point. But the real sad thing is that if you're an athlete, at least in football anyway, your career maybe span anywhere from 2 years, 6 years, 10 years if you're lucky. But when that's over, it's over. Okay? Your career is over. Everything that you put your heart and soul and mind and body to is gone. So, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? Here's what pissed me off about this. As I see everyone, watching, I see Paul McCartney or Mick Jagger, Bruce Springsteen, they're all plying their craft now at the ages, 65, 70, 72, and they're making more money now than they made when they were young, And, unless you are fortunate enough like I was to, land a job in, broadcasting and cover games, the rest of, a lot of my contemporaries, can't say the same thing. And it kind of breaks your heart. I get calls all the time from guys who feel like lost, and they're sort of like the fact that we're part of a special family, and if somebody's down, they'll call you up. I mean, I can't believe how many calls I used to play with the Jets. I got a call from Joe Namath. I got a call from a whole bunch of guys from the Bears that played on the '85 Super Bowl. The best call I got of all was came from a 92-year-old woman. And I called up the phone. I said, "Hello?" And she goes, "Mike?" I said, "Yeah, who's this?" "Mike, this is Phyllis Stram. How you doing?" And Phyllis, of course, was Hank Stram's widow, who I played for Hank Stram. And he goes, "Mike, I just want you to know that we love you here, and you're my husband's favorite guy because you drove me crazy." and those kind of things I just I take to heart. So I'm now 3 years removed from announcing that I have this stuff, and my whole thing is everybody. There's been a couple things that he wins the Hero Award or Courage Award, and I said, boy, that's so much bullshit. I said, I am a survivor, and that's what we all are, and try to squeeze as much time as we possibly can on this planet Earth for the gifts that we've been given, and that's sort of like where I'm at right now, is to make the most of your time. And I don't mean this to be an obit or something. I'm very much alive. I'm very active. I still have dreams. I can do, climb the Empire State Building, which I've done on the inside. They have stair climbs all the time. I do hustle up the hand. I do as much stuff as I possibly can to keep my mind off of, because the one thing they haven't taken away from me is, except for this, fine motor skills, is my ability to work out. If you stop moving, we all know this, you might as well do that, your life will come to a screeching halt. So I just keep on moving until I can't move anymore, and I'm long way away from that. And, you know, and one thing that I had one thing that set me back. But I'm a crazy man. When I, you know, put something, weight in my arm or vest on my, you know, whatever, I'll take it to do. Anyway, one of the things I did for working out was to climb my stairs in the back of our 3-story building. And I'd climb up the stairs and I used it as a workout tool. And one day I kept climbing, I just was having trouble. I got to the top of the stairs, I was going, and then I tried it again, the same thing. I said, something's wrong here, so I go to the cardiologist. He gives me a stress test, and he said, Mike, you have something called cardiomyopathy.
We have all these long terms.
Yeah. I said, cut to the chase. He said, well, it's a hardening of the left ventricle, and blood doesn't get to the right ventricle, blah, 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 blah. To make a long story short, Michael, you need a pacemaker. So
Well,
I have what?
The reason you need a pacemaker, though, you know, as a doctor, is that this condition was fairly easy to treat, the cardiologist says. Beta blockers. Trouble was, Mike, because he's so fit, because he works out hours every day, his resting heart rate was 48. So the beta blockers slow down, and you know, it relaxes heart muscle, so it pumps more efficiently, but it also slows down. So in order to keep him alive, we had to put the pacemaker in before they could give him the beta blocker. So bottom line is, yeah, so we had a little, we had to readjust your workout schedule.
He's my friend now, okay? And for $1, you can come up and touch me. Which is kind of funny because she cringes when I tell like a bad joke or something like that. But one of the many things that you can do to help stop this decline is things that help your cognitive functioning. I found out that you know, boxing, believe it or not, is one thing that you can do. Not getting hit in the face or getting inside a ring, but getting with a partner and going through the whole punch combination. A jab is 1, double jab is 2, 3 is cross, right? You know, 4 is. By the time you reach 6, and then my instructor would go 5, 6, 4, 5, 1, 1. When I was done, I was like, wow. The back of my brain was like burning, but it was just really awesome. And I said, I got to do more stuff like this, you know. And so going back to what I was just trying to get into was another thing that'll do it was, you know, improv classes. So we're liable to do one of those because I can, you know, give me a word and I'll make some kind of crazy thing.
Your second acting.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sorry. I mean, she's got all the. First of all, let me say that I would be dead were it not for Kim. She is the sine qua non in my life. In Latin, that means without which there is nothing. So she has had to put up with a whole bunch of crap from me for a long time, and I thank my lucky stars every moment that I have. That because I wasn't the greatest husband, but you know, I am what I am, and I'm doing my best to have her fall in love with me again. So anyway.
Nice. Can you tell us about the organization you've set up? What the goals are of your organization? What the barriers you've encountered?
Mm-hmm. You know, we mentioned that so many people have contacted us, and we saw there was a need to support the people who there's nothing out there. I mean, so many people suffering and lives are being destroyed. And I'm a part of the NFL. It's a Facebook group, NFL Wives. There's 2,500 of us, and the stories. It's a private group. The stories would shock you, though. Extreme things that you would never believe. Of families being broken up, young mothers having to take their children to a hotel for a few days because the men are in a rage. He mentioned, you know, Mike Webster. His widow is on there. The stories. There's another quarterback's ex-wife. The quarterback had shot himself in the head but survived, and you know the ongoing. On and on and on. I had a young mother, call me this week in tears because of abuse from the husband. There's a lot of pain out there. And then just everyday people, as I mentioned, not knowing what to do, and they're lost, and they're losing everything too, but they don't have a backup system. We're fortunate that we have an organization. We're fortunate that Mike has been able to maintain the career that he did to sustain us. We're fortunate that we have access to the doctors that we have. So we created this outreach. The Concussion Legacy Foundation is, I think, the best and largest established organization to fight CTE and traumatic brain injury and concussion-related disorders. And they came to the story on us. And when they saw this protocol that we were following, and they said, would you come under our organization as a part of an outreach to help the people? So our goal is to not only to spread awareness and to advocate for research and for legislation for prevention, but to create a network of support for others who are suffering. And so we spent the last year going out and speaking a lot and hearing from people, and now we're starting to, we're really excited because we've identified multiple levels and networks of support to reach out to help those who are suffering. The one thing that we have is that we can support one another until a cure is found, and I'm confident that a cure will be found, hopefully soon.
You mentioned a word that I think a lot of in my life, prevention. I'm not sure if I could put a number on how much of my day is spent on prevention, talking about seat belts, talking about bike helmets. It's flu shot season. So, as a family doctor, when I read about CTE and read about the current research and think about how far we are from a cure, I think about prevention. Do you guys have any thoughts about prevention of CTE?
You bet. First thing is, you know that song I'm always reminded, Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. I feel like, Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be, I hate to say it to football players. The game as it is extremely dangerous. The one thing that we can do is for our little players, is to keep them safe. Kids don't need to be tackling and whacking their heads around when they're 10, 11 years old. The anatomy, their heads are oversized, their necks and musculature is not able to support the head. You put this big old helmet on them and then they go running, and the G-forces are just as bad then as a college player. And the damage is much more extensive because the brains are at a vulnerable developmental stage. So number one, we don't want them playing tackle football. Soccer organization has already prevented petting, so we're preventing that. So looking at youth sports, but let's talk about then, we have generations of people who have grown up playing sport. So what can we do for those who are at risk? Young people in their 20s, 30s, and the one thing, do you want to say something? Let me finish
This is a whole new thing.
Okay, so one of the things you can do is, I mentioned promoting neurogenesis. You can build up your cognitive reserve to delay or offset brain damage. The brain is a remarkable organ. It has in its plasticity. And so think of your cognitive reserve like your bank account for a rainy day. You keep adding to it so that when you need it, you can draw from it. And this is the cognitive reserve, is actually a term that the neurologists use with us. And so what are some things that you can do right now to be adding to your cognitive reserve? Okay, cognitive stimulation, keep learning. And if something becomes easy, you're not learning anymore. You need to challenge yourself. Take up something new, so something novel. Exercise is huge. Any kind of exercise is good. Certain kinds are better than others. They found team sports. Why? It's the social component. Okay? But exercise in general. Get out there, get moving, keep your body moving. Like Mike said, never stop moving. That provides oxygenation to the brain, but also if you're learning new things, like Mike mentioned, the boxing, so you're adding that element and the social element, your brain is firing on multiple levels. So you're promoting brain growth. Your diet, anti-inflammatory, low glycemic. Sugar it causes everything to swell up. Inflammation is our enemy, especially for your brain. So low glycemic, anti-inflammatory, we use good clean proteins. We do use supplements, vitamins. The B6 is good. We use turmeric and the omega-3s, the good fats, like avocado. What are some other good fats? Fish, oh, tons of salmon. Yeah, I make the shakes that, he's so tired of kale and blueberries and walnuts, but they're real basic things.
Because it lets you off the hook. Those are things that are easy to make. You don't have to get the pot out. You don't have to boil anything.
That's right.
Come on.
Throw it in the smoothie. I'm happy. But so your diet. The other thing, socialization, is connection with other people. We are social animals. And what research is showing, an overarching theme that threads through everything that is good for us, contains socialization. We need connection, we need community. So anytime you add that in, that's an extra potent mix that is going to preserve your brain and cognitive functioning. So that if indeed you're at risk and you've got some trauma in there, building your cognitive reserve is going to offset manifestation, the more severe manifestation, or delay the manifestation of that damage. So let me give you an example, a concrete example. So when we found out about Mike, and I did this research, and we started Mike on this stuff, 2 years later, they did another brain scan. So Mike, from May 2008, he had a big, brain workup. And then he had another one at the end of 2015, in December. And just in that time period, they ran through all the latest technology, analyzing the thickness of the neocortex and blah, blah, blah. What they found is that Mike had lost 10 to 12% of his brain volume just in that time period. To show you how significant that was, Mike had the brain of a man who was 12 to 15 years older than him. He had the brain of an 83-year-old. That was at age 66, and that was in January of 2016. We started these lifestyle changes, and here's the thing. It's like anything. The more you practice, the more benefits you're going to have. So I knew that in implementing these changes, an hour or a week here and there wasn't going to do it. Not when you're fighting the ongoing brain damage. Not when his brain is literally rotting in his head. This had to be 24/7. It had to be consistent in everything we did. Everything was a learning and growth opportunity. 2 years later, they did another brain study and analyzed it. And guess what? He showed no overall loss of brain volume. We have multiple doctors look over the data. No overall loss. When in the previous 6 years, he had lost 10 to 12%. They said this was significant. Now, we didn't stop the CTE. That damage continued. And you can see it in the neuropsychological functioning tests, memory tests, etc. But what we did is we were able to promote enough brain growth, alternative growth, to slow down the progression and just allow him to function better. So my point is, if we can see those kinds of results in somebody who is actively fighting a serious degenerative brain disorder, for most of us everyday folks, if we're able to make some pretty simple lifestyle changes, we're able to protect ourselves. And those who are at risk, I can't recommend this enough. We don't have a cure, but there are things that you can do to keep yourself healthy and functioning.
Thank you. I thought we could open this up for questions from the audience. Would that be all right with you?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Any questions from anybody?
I have the mic here.
Oh, sorry.
Do you want to? Yeah, I can. Okay.
Yes. Oh, you have a mic, sorry. Questions from anybody?
Hi, my name is Jackie Hutchison, and I'm a physical therapist, and I treat people who've had concussions. So first, thanks for coming. And I just wanted for the community to mention that we have a Rock Steady boxing chapter here in Grinnell that Georgia Plum, she's a physical therapy assistant, owns. It's this non-contact boxing that you mentioned as part of your treatment. But my question is, on your website, I find this to be really, really hopeful. And my question for you is, what do you base that hope on?
I'm going to lead into this and then throw it to you, Mike, because this is Mike. Mike has, I've always called him the eternal boy of summer. He's got this young spirit, very, very young soul, exuberance and a zest for life. He has always said yes to everything in life. I mean, it's skydives and scuba. He's done 5 Ironman competitions starting at age 50. He loves life. And so that's living with this man and seeing his strength, the grace with which he handles this, how he commits to this, and he's not letting it defeat him. That's what gives me hope. And that's what, when Mike says he was going to be the one to live with it, he didn't mean just survive, just get by, but to live a good quality life. And when these guys and the families are suffering through this and so much loss, and there's no cure yet, nobody knows what to do, that's what goes first, is hope, and just despair sets in. So that's what we're hoping to do, is give hope. Mike, you want to talk more about it? Because this is how you live your life.
Yeah, all the things she says is true. I just can't hammer home enough the fact that here's what it's like. This kind of sums it up. If you ever, with all the hurricanes that are happening now, and you can show you the eye of the hurricane and the big circular thing like that. And I said, that's kind of what it's like. I'm fighting like hell, just so I can keep breathing, And sometimes it's like you see the icebergs, the Arctic icebergs, and a big chunk of ice kind of breaks off and it floats away, and you can never get that back again. Those kind of things just, kind of when you're all alone by yourself, and that's the kind of stuff you think of, and man, that's the worst thing you can possibly do. It's hard to keep the demons away from us, but it's imperative, And if you're lucky enough to have a partner, a wife, a friend who can share with you that kind of stuff, I just can't say enough about it,
And Jackie, I'm glad you brought this up. I want to. This disease is horrendous. I mean, there's no sugarcoating that, and it's so hard to explain, and it's so hard to, like he mentioned, the pieces of the iceberg dropping off, and so to see, him struggling and to lose parts of the man that I know and love every day. But let me tell you about this guy. Depression is a big part of this. They fight depression. The brain is dying, and the brain is reacting to that. But this guy, so when he starts to sink down, and I take him by the shoulders and I look him in the eye and I say, Mike, that's the CTE talking. That's not you. Don't let it win. And I can see in his eyes, he'll think, and he's pulling from the very depths of his soul. And it's like, he raises up and he goes, you're right. And boom, he's out the door. He's doing something. He's working out. He's reading that book. He's calling a friend. He's reaching out to somebody else. That's what it takes. That's the hope. And like, you know, when I mentioned, he's talked about talking to the people, and they call him. That's part of what we're doing, is creating, when we talk about this network, not just going out, but the people who are suffering, when they talk to somebody else, they're giving back. They have not only that connection then with somebody else, but they have a sense of purpose. That just by listening to somebody else, just by being there for somebody else, they have a purpose. They're contributing. They have a reason. And that keeps people going. So that's our hope. That's what we're trying to do for other people.
Thank you, Kim. Any other questions? Dave?
Do you enjoy watching football games?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's in my blood. Like I said, my dad was a football player. I met all of his buddies would come over to my house. People like Otto Graham, Lou Groza, Dante Lavelli, Max Speedy. I don't know if you remember any of these names. Get a lot of nods on this side of the room. And those people, I get a picture of me and Jim Brown's on this little white dot on his big, massive leg, and he's bouncing up and down. I got to know him. A lot of my television career and all that other stuff, my playing football helped pave the way. So when people ask that question, would you do it all over again? If I had known what I know now, probably not. And then I lied to myself. I said, yeah, you would. It's just, you know, I was watching, I forget what game it was, doesn't matter what it was, but they had all the players at the beginning of the game, and they're all screaming, they're all, you know, in the huddle together, and go, ha, 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 ha! You know, I want to get out there, I want to do it all over. And you cannot express just the power of that. And it's not just football. You know, it's women playing soccer, whatever team you were on. I'll remember when I went to Northwestern, there was a guy, the women's volleyball team that had won the championship like 10 years in a row. They were all inducted into the Northwestern Athletic Hall of Fame. And I remember doing a story on them, and that's all they could talk about was the friendship that they had carved out together. So I don't think we're going to see that go away anytime soon. I mean, we'd love to make the sport better, safer, but, you know, I don't think that that's going to happen because just evolution, you know. Players are bigger, faster, stronger, mass times acceleration equals, you know. Everything is just, you know, it's, I love the game, but I want to make sure that are we doing enough? That's the big question. And
But do you think the game could be made safe?
no, no. And not only say, I mean, they're doing everything in their power. If you looked at these helmets the guys wear today, it's like the inside of a NASCAR helmet. You know,
But I don't think that the helmet technology is ultimately going to protect the
no,
brain.
it's not.
That RNA.
No, it's not. I'm just saying what it is right now. You know, the college football, everybody stood up and they know what's at risk here. They know how to protect yourself. But I'm not sure. I went to I remember a Super Bowl about 4 years ago, and they were talking to a defensive back who played for the Baltimore Ravens, and he raised a few eyebrows when he said, "I wouldn't be surprised if this game becomes obsolete one day. And as much as I love the game, I can see that happening. I went to an Alabama LSU game this last year with a friend of mine named Johnny Musso, who was the original Italian stallion. He played at Alabama. And we get down there, and if you think, Ohio State versus Michigan is a great rivalry, USC and UCLA is a great rivalry, you haven't seen anything until you go to an SEC game down in the South where there's 130,000 people from Alabama yelling, "Roll Tide! Roll Tide!" And there's all these kids that are coming out and they're built like Adonis, and they got their shirts are off and they're catching balls with one hand and they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Nick Saban, who's a friend of mine, had us on the sideline, and they had about 30 high school kids who were going to be possible recruits there, and they're all lined up, and they all look like they're in shape. The atmosphere was apocalyptic. They had music playing, dun 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 dun, and then you see Navy SEALs, sparkling, and they all land on the 50-yard line, going, oh, and the opening kickoff. A guy catches the ball, runs about 10 yards, and gets hit, and he's out cold, and they take a golf cart out there, and they take him off, and they put another guy in there who was just as good as the last guy. And we looked at each other, Mr. Musso and I, and we go, did we play this game? I said, my goodness. So, if I was 21 again, I would look at all the possible, options of playing. And all I can say is that it's not going to go away. The game is not going to disappear. I think too many people like it. It's part of our DNA, at least Americans anyway. How do we make it safer? I'm really...
But all that, I think, is a big part of the problem in finding answers and helping prevent this and helping treat and helping advance research even.
Yeah, well,
because we've got, you mentioned the NFL. The NFL is a huge machine. Tons of money and even more power. And they don't want to see their franchise can. They're going to do everything they can to protect that. Part of that is denying the existence of CTE, invalidating research. They've done that for decades now. Got to the point where finally they could not deny it anymore. Then they committed to donating $30 million to research, but they rescinded that. They took their money back, and they're doing their own research now, which is conflicted. And they're not doing anything to help the players who are suffering. The NFL class action lawsuit is a joke. I won't get into the details, but if you hear the payouts that they try to create this narrative that there's $700 million going out. No, the obstacles that the ex-players have to go through, the denials, the appeals, the rationale they're giving for denying or delaying the claims, and even if they're approved, ultimately the payout is much less than what was even stated in the charts and what's due to them. Trust me, that's another obstruction tactic. They're not helping the players, and they're not supporting them. The other part of that is the NFL does a brilliant job at branding, and so like Mike was saying, it's in our DNA as a country. As we love our football, and in the South, I think is a really big example of that. But that's what we come up against, though. The people don't want to hear it either. They don't want to hear the reality. It's in their blood. I have 5 cousins in Georgia. Bobby, Kenny, Davy, Denny, and Ricky, who have children and grandchildren, and they all play Georgia and Georgia Tech, and one of their wives said to me, "But Kim, you don't get it. This is in our blood." And I said, "No, Dana, you don't get it. I mean, it's in nobody's blood more than Mike's. you know, Mike just gave you this, you know, his life history. He was born into this sport. Literally, you know, his coaches and these players were at the hospital when he was born. And 2 years later, my cousin-in-laws, they called me. Her brother, who was 50, passed. They studied his brain. His life had been falling apart. They donated his brain. The Concussion Legacy Foundation autopsied it. He had CTE. And she said, now I know what you're talking about. Now, he didn't play in the pros. He didn't even play in college. He just played through high school. But until it touches them personally, people aren't going to recognize it. People want this football. You know, yeah, we love it. It's a beautiful sport to watch, and we love the whole culture around it. But that's part of what's keep holding us back. There's this cognitive dissonance going on. You know, when you watch it, and it's like, I love watching it, but I can't watch it anymore. So I think, you know, as a nation, as a culture, you know, we've got to come to terms with this. Yes, we love it, but it's how can we love something that's killing people?
I think there was a question up here.
You already started talking about the new type of helmets developed, but I was just wondering if you could give us some insight on how it was when you were playing and how the helmets were.
Well, they called our helmets brain buckets. They were made by Riddell, and they had it looked like a spider web thing that had no give at all. When guys come off the field and say, I had my bell rung, well, that's why, because your head could go off. It just wasn't very, very protective. All the things that it claimed it could be. I mean, I think there's still cases against Riddell that have law for the last 30 years that haven't been,
I think there was just a case that they won against Riddell. I just read that.
Yeah, well, yeah, and the narrative is kind of changing too. I mean, like Kim was talking about the NFL, they don't really care one way or another. They've got all these players who don't care, and the reason why they don't care is they're all making $1 million a year, and they're not about to bite the hand that feeds them. So we're kind of forgetting about the NFL, and now the focus is on what colleges, and colleges are doing a great job of they've gotten the message, they're trying their darndest to make the game as quick as possible. Safe as possible. But again, it might be climbing up to, I don't know how possible it is. I don't know your athletic director here, what he thinks, that they've ever had this conversation of how to make the game safer. One thing I would say is that my dad, who like I said, pro football player, doctor, was really kind of ahead of the game. He would not let me play Pee Wee football. He wouldn't let me play until I was a sophomore in high school. And the reason why is that, son, you're not physically prepared to play this game that is so rough and tough. And he said, you got to get yourself bulletproof. I want you. There's things that you can do as an athlete first before you put on a pair of shoulder pads. It's like Muhammad Ali, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. The art of boxing was the art of not getting it, the art of not being it. And you can teach athletes to do the same thing. Long before you put on a pair of shoulder pads, make them go out and play track, or do track and field, or play baseball, or another sport that allows you to do all these different things. Kim's heard the story a lot of times, but I still think it bears merit. The old Soviet Union hockey teams that won the Olympics every single year, save for the Miracle on Ice year in 1980. The reason why, at least most people thought this was the case through play sports, that they were so good is they taught them at an early age how to move. The Soviet coaches would scour the countryside and they they look for young guys who are willing to, can I take your son out, 12, 13 years old, and we have a camp that lasted 3 months. In the first 6 weeks of this camp, the kids, no pucks, no sticks, just themselves skating. And they had some, 2 figure skaters from the Soviet team, gals as a matter of fact. Taught them how to, move and space and float. And so after that month was over and they improved their skating and they looked tremendous, they gave them no puck, but they gave them the stick. And they learned how to move with the stick in their hand. And then they eventually got the puck in their hand. And after a while, they found out that, when the kids started having games, guys would go to, crash one of the kids against the board, never had a chance to catch because he was gone. He was gone. And so I think that's one way. For instance, Newt Rockne, people don't know this story. He had, remember the Four Horsemen? The Four Horsemen, they actually took ballet classes, once a week. True story. Because they moved, they learned how, their formations always changed and whatever, and they were actually beautiful. You don't use the word beautiful in sports much, but they were beautiful to watch them. And maybe that's one way to make the game safer is, teach them to move. One of the stupidest things, I'll say this right now, that you can do to a kid going to high school is tell them that they can, you got to play football, we need you 24/7, 365. Yeah, I mean, I can't play baseball in the springtime, I can't do track and field. That's really ridiculous. My brother had his son was he got a scholarship, he was an all-state player at Wheaton North in Illinois, and he was a guard. He was about like 6'3", 250, and his coach told my brother, well, we want him, he's not supposed to play these other games. We want him for football. My brother said, "What, are you crazy?" I said, he's a football player, and he's a basketball player, and what do they do in football that will transfer to, he moves like this all the time, which is, that's in basketball. That'll help you in football too. If let him go out for track and field, have him, this full, beautiful, wonderful, full circle. Huh? Yeah. I think that's one great way to deal with it, And, if you had one commodity whether, no matter what the sport, quickness, the number one asset you can have. And you can teach a guy how to get faster, or a gal how to get faster. Again, it's, it can be done. Maybe not at the NFL level, by then it's a little bit, but you look at all these young kids who are coming in there now, they're fast, they're mobile, agile, and they get a little bit of hostile in them, and they're ready to go.
Nice. I think we have another question, Don.
Yeah, and I think Don has to be the last question.
We talking too much?
No, but everyone
Would I think it says?
come up here and talk to you individually, so we'll leave time for that.
My great niece down in Tennessee took an elbow when she was playing basketball, hit the floor, and staggered off the court and collapsed on the bench. And she was diagnosed with a concussion. And her father, my nephew, took this up with the Tennessee State High School Athletic Association, and he didn't want to contest what was not done to the opposing player, but he proposed to them that the TSSAA ought to keep a record of concussions and have some kind of idea of the dimensions of the problem. They weren't doing that, and for all he could find out, there may have been a lot of girls, in this case, who had taken hits like that, never had them properly diagnosed, and were kind of living with this in ignorance of it. What's being done to keep track of these injuries?
A couple of important points that you bring up in your story. There's a problem in diagnosing concussions because for a lot of concussions, symptoms don't show up right away. They may not manifest or be clear until several days or somewhat later. The other thing is that even if we know that a concussion has occurred, what we're finding out is that it takes much longer, and it varies, according to it. It can take much longer to recover from a concussion than we used to believe and used to treat, and that the type of side effects and manifestation of the brain damage is much more pervasive than what they used to think. So what needs to be done is, number one, yes, keeping track of it. So if you see, so the Concussion Legacy Foundation has concussion protocols, and they have advocacy programs. One is the Team Up, Speak Up. So the players on the floor, on the field, if your teammate takes a hit that seems, pretty hard, if they're a bit woozy, if they're laying on the ground a couple seconds too long, if you look them in the eye and they're, just look, you advocate for your teammate. You pull them off, you speak up for them. Because part of the problem too with the concussion is that you're not able to think and make good judgments for yourself at that time. So number one, for the teams to be looking out for one another and advocating and err on the side of caution. Number two, for all of the teams, there are many levels of athletics and many sports that don't have team doctor. What's the person called on the sidelines? The athletic trainer, yes. Don't have any kind of medical, person available to make that call. Coaches aren't always as knowledgeable. Coaches may be busy. They may not notice. It hasn't been a priority. But there needs to be somebody, a medical expert, always there advocating and looking for it and to pull them off the field and to keep them safe, to make those calls and to be documenting. The other thing that we need to be doing is to be supporting them in their recovery better. At the collegiate level, that would include not only resting from the sport and the medical supervision and follow-up, but it also involves the mental health follow-up and the academic follow-up. Because the recovery academically, they're not able to go into their classes right away and be able to function at the same way. And as I said, the recovery time, I know the doctors can speak to this better, but the recovery time is different for the individual. The other thing that recent study is showing is that the female brain is more susceptible to concussion and may take longer to recover. Again, we're finding out so much more about the brain, and it's not as hardy and resilient as we used to think. It's actually much more susceptible to injury. So we've got to be advocating for our athletes right now. That was a good question, Don. Thank you.
Dr. Ferguson, Mike and Kim, Adam Lee, thank you.